upside wins matchups. We're going to give you the players we think have that huge upside and could help you win your playoff matchup this week. Before we get into that, one more reminder that if you haven't tried Underdog yet, it's still a great time to do so. First of all, if you're a new customer and you sign up using promo code ENDGAME, you get this free pick'em. It's Matthew Stafford tonight just getting 1 yard. That's right. If Matthew Stafford gets 1 yard total on Thursday night, you get that pick'em. That's a win for you. You can combine it with any other pick and triple your very first entry. You also still get a 100% deposit match up to $100, because this is a great time to try Underdog if you haven't yet. They're going to have some playoff best ball leagues going on and other things throughout the playoffs. But now let's get to those boom picks. So let's start off. Your first player that you feel really good about in Week 16.
I feel really good about Courtland Sutton this week. I felt really good about him last week too. Didn't necessarily boom, but had a nice game. But I think he'll be even better this week. He's at home against the New England Patriots. You think, oh, New England, good defense, slow paced. And you're right, they are. But there's reasons to think Courtland Sutton should benefit in this matchup. The main reason is New England plays the most man coverage of any defense in the NFL. Almost half the time they are in man coverage, which this day and age is extremely high. Courtland Sutton actually ranks 17th among all wide receivers in fantasy points per route run against man coverage, ranking just behind guys like Justin Jefferson and Chris Olave. When it comes to man coverage, Courtland Sutton has been great. I think he's going to be great against this New England secondary. But also, New England giving up the 8th most touchdowns to wide receivers. We know this is how Courtland Sutton's been making his living this year, scoring touchdowns. He didn't score last week. You know what that means? He's due. He's due for a touchdown, right? Like positive regression. He didn't score last week. Well, now he has to score this week. That's just how it works this year. It's a great spot for him to score against this defense. Broncos playing at home against a defense that plays a ton of man coverage. I think Courtland Sutton bounces back, finds the end zone this week, has a big game. Again, he wasn't terrible last week. There's a good chance if you started Courtland Sutton, you won your matchup. And if you did, he can help you even more this week and get you to your fantasy finals.
All right, I'm going to start off with a pick that I myself almost can't believe. I doubted Baker Mayfield throughout the preseason, even throughout the season itself. There are spots here and there where you might stream him because you had to. But then we had seen the last few weeks, he had just kind of tapered off, had been mediocre, kind of just forgot about him. And so what happens in Week 15, he had his best game as a Tampa Bay Buck, one of the best games of the entire week among all quarterbacks. So does that mean that all of a sudden we have to trust in him and that you're going to want to play him in the playoffs in Week 16? Well, the answer for me is yes, but let me tell you why. It's not just because, he did well last week, that means he's going to light it up this week, because that's not how it works, especially with a guy like Mayfield. But yeah, 381 yards and 4 touchdowns, that's impressive, but what's most impressive, he did that in only 28 pass attempts. He didn't have to throw it 50 times. It's not a game where they were losing, so this was all garbage time. He was just really good. And again, I find it hard to believe I'm saying this, but Baker Mayfield was legit. This is why he was drafted number 1. After all, he's got that potential in him. He just doesn't always show it. But gotta love the fact that it wasn't just the Mike Evans show. Chris Godwin, who is a legit receiver, just wasn't getting the targets. Now, finally, they figured out, hey, we should get him the ball. He had a big game. Evans is still a stud there. Rachaad White has been on fire. This offense just looks good. And now they're going to get to play the Jacksonville Jaguars. Well, the Jaguars, are reeling. They're all sorts of banged up in the secondary. All their corners are hurt. The Jaguars actually have been a pass-funnel defense all season long. This has been a great matchup for quarterbacks. As of right now, heading into Week 16, they've allowed the second most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. And it's not that far off between them and Philly. That's right, the Jags defense is actually even a better matchup for quarterbacks than the Washington Commanders. So Mayfield on fire, great matchup. If you're looking for a quarterback to stream, or even if you just aren't sold on whoever your starter is, I think you got to go with Mayfield. All right, who else do you feel like you need to roll with this week?
I think you've got to roll with Chuba Hubbard this week. This is a guy getting incredible workhorse volume. I don't think any running back is getting the volume that Chuba Hubbard is getting right now, outside of maybe Christian McCaffrey. 22 carries or more in the last 3 games. Not to mention he's caught 2 passes in each of the last 2 games, so it's not like he's just running the ball and not catching passes. The downside here has been, well, the touchdowns, because he plays for the Carolina Panthers, unfortunately. But it hasn't really held him back as far as performance goes, because 87 or more yards in 3 straight games, he's actually looked good running the ball. He's been one of the bright spots on this not so bright Carolina offense so far. And now he gets a matchup at home against this Green Bay defense that is just reeling with injuries, bottom 10 against the run this year. And you got to think touchdown regression is coming. A guy getting this many touches, this many opportunities is bound to just fall in the end zone just simply by sheer luck and the law of averages. This week, in a great matchup, I could definitely see him finally finding the end zone again. We know he's going to get over 20 carries. He's going to catch 2+ passes. He's probably going to go for 90 to 100 yards, if not more, against this defense. And he might score a touchdown or two. And look, even if you're like, well, I got better options than Chuba Hubbard, I'm not sure I want to put him in my lineup, that's fine. You definitely want to take advantage of him on an underdog. Because right now you look at his early line on underdog, 68.5 yards. Yeah, I'm smashing the higher on that. Like I said, he's gone 87 plus in 3 straight, and now he gets a bottom 10 defense to run against. And as you said, you take that line, you pair it with that Matthew Stafford free pick, new customer special. Right there, you instantly triple your money. Just make sure you use promo code ENDGAME when you sign up at Underdog Fantasy to take advantage of that deposit match, dollar for dollar, up to $100. Put it on the Chuba Hubbard line, pair it with the new customer special, and you got a great chance of tripling your money right away.
So a running back I like this week is really not a workhorse, but he's definitely the lead back. Isaiah Pacheco in Kansas City, he's been gone the last couple weeks, should be back. In fact, Andy Reid has basically already said, yeah, he's good to go. He's playing in Week 16, and this is a perfect time because he gets to face the Raiders. And so game script should be at the very least neutral, if not positive, for KC. And KC, look, they want to establish the run. They need to establish the run because what is going on with this receiving core? Rashee Rice is the only guy I think you feel like you can even like that to see them target at this point. Kadarius Toney, just get off the field. Travis Kelce doesn't look like himself. He's okay, but he does not look like an elite player at this point. Sky Moore is now out for the season. Establishing the run is going to make all the sense in the world. They're going to welcome Pacheco back. And let's not forget, just a couple of weeks ago, when these two teams face each other, Isaiah Pacheco had 2 touchdowns, and he can definitely do that again. This guy is itching to get back on the field. We saw Jerick McKinnon and Clyde Edwards-Helaire all getting in the end zone despite not really putting up good numbers on the ground. Pacheco could do both. He can get you yardage and score touchdowns. So he is good to go. He's healthy. It's a good matchup for him. I feel like the Chiefs are going to want to establish him early and often. So got Pacheco. I have no hesitation on putting him straight into my lineup. All right, believe it or not, we got some more running backs we feel good about. Who you think is going to have a boom week?
Yeah, even I'm having trouble with this one, but sometimes you got to look at the things and just say, hey, this is what it's pointing to. And a lot of signs are pointing to Breece Hall bouncing back this week and having a big game. Chances are, if you started Breece Hall last week, you may not be playing anymore, or at least may not be playing for a fantasy championship. But if you somehow are, maybe this week he bounces back and helps you because he gets the Washington Commanders at home this week. And I know we talk about the Commanders all the time being this terrible passing defense, and they are. But they're also terrible against the run. They're the 8th worst against the run this year. And unlike last week where the Dolphins just ran it up on the Jets and they pretty much just benched Breece Hall at the end of the game and finally gave Izzy some work, you don't have to worry about that this week with Sam Howell and the Commanders offense. That won't happen. What I really like about Breece Hall in this matchup is not this perceived, at any moment he can rip off a long run for a touchdown. I mean, when's the last time he's done that? Let's be real. I mean, anybody in the NFL who gets enough space can rip off a long run for a touchdown. What I like about Breece Hall this week is what he can do in the passing game, the damage he can do in the passing game. Because prior to last week, he had caught 5 or more passes in 4 straight games. And when you look at this Commanders defense, they've allowed 5 or more catches to running backs in every game but 4 this year. There's no reason to think Breece Hall can't catch 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 9 or 10 passes this week against Commanders defense. Zach Wilson coming off a concussion, Trevor Siemian, it doesn't matter. They're all going to check it down to Breece Hall repeatedly because that's pretty much what this offense is. Throw it to Garrett Wilson, check it down to Breece Hall. That's the entire offense. So in a great matchup like this, if you survived his absolute brutal dud last week, maybe he bounces back in a big way this week and takes you to the finals.
I got a similar player in mind, a running back, the veteran James Conner. Now, first of all, James Conner, I think we can say is finally back, meaning back to being a fantasy stud. It was a brutal matchup last week against the 49ers, and you know what? He still came through early on, scored a touchdown, wound up with 86 yards on the ground, and that's in a game where, look, they basically had to abandon the run because 49ers kept running up the score on them, but he still came through with good numbers. He has been good all season long. He's averaging 5 yards per carry, which is pretty impressive considering the offense he's in. He's been effective. He's getting all the volume. He hadn't put a big fantasy number since coming back from injury, but a lot of that is just because, this team just couldn't afford to give him the ball enough. But now we've seen 2 straight weeks he has put up big games, and I think he does it again. Going against Chicago. Now, Chicago is not a bad defense. In fact, I keep talking about how much better they have been lately. But that's mainly against the pass. They're still not a great run defense, but one thing that has been consistent all year long and remains so is that the Bears give up a ton, in fact, the most receiving yards and receptions to running backs. For whatever reason, it just happens. And so Conner is not a heavy volume receiver out of the backfield, but he might need to be more so because Hollywood Brown, again, is out. This guy just can't stay on the field this year. There's just not a lot of other options here. They're going to give the ball to Conner on the ground, and I think they're going to give it to him a little bit more through the air because they're going to exploit this matchup with the Bears. So Conner, a guy who's a workhorse, he's got touchdown upside. It's not a terrible spot for him. In fact, it might be pretty good specifically for our running back. So at this point, all back in on Conner. I think he's a must start. All right, let's stick with that matchup. There's another player you feel has huge upside.
Yeah, on the other side there, I like quarterback Justin Fields, also coming off kind of a down game last week, let you down. But remember, that was on the road against the Browns. This is at home against the Arizona Cardinals. The Arizona Cardinals who are allowing the 5th most points to fantasy quarterbacks. And look, it really should have been a bigger game for Justin Fields last week. People have kind of overlooked the fact that Robert Tonyan, yes, former Packers tight end Robert Tonyan, dropped an easy long touchdown that Justin Fields dropped right into his hands. He just flat out dropped it. Otherwise, it would have been a huge touchdown. And let's not also overlook the fact that Darnell Mooney dropped the game-winning Hail Mary as well. Justin Fields could have had a huge game last week. He just didn't. But now he will, because it's the Cardinals. Also, we know the rushing upside of Justin Fields. No, he didn't have a huge rushing day last week, but again, that was the Browns. Prior to last week, 3 straight games with at least 12 carries, had run for 100 yards in 2 games. He's got massive rushing upside this week, especially against the Cardinals. Plus, he could definitely hit on some long plays to DJ Moore. They're not going to be able to cover DJ Moore. They're not going to be able to stop him. This is not the Browns defense. This is a huge, huge drop down from the Browns defense. I expect Justin Fields to bounce back in a major way at home against this hapless Arizona Cardinals defense. If you survived his game last week, or maybe you just didn't need him last week, and now the quarterback you play doesn't have as good of a matchup, roll with Justin Fields this week. He'll come through.
Well, with the way this season has gone, especially the last couple of weeks, in your fantasy playoffs, we really have no idea what's going to happen. So I think it's only fitting I end with a Falcons player, because if there's an offense we really have no idea what to expect, it would be the Falcons. But let's go back to the well on this one. Drake London. Why do I like Drake London? It's easy. They're back at home. And out of all the teams that have shown to be somewhat schizophrenic, the Falcons, yes, are one, partly because they're head coach, but also this team, for some reason, has the most pronounced home road split out of anybody. It had been Tennessee, but now Tennessee has decided for some reason to win on the road and lose at home, so I guess that's gone. But not so for Atlanta, who actually managed to somehow lose on the road in Carolina. But the good news is they're going back home, and this week they get the Colts. It's a decent matchup. I'm not going to say it's a smash spot for a receiver. So even though Indy was terrible against receivers early in the season, they've gotten much better. But Drake London has been so much better at home. This is how exaggerated the splits are. He gets double the number of receptions per game at home, 6 versus 3, and averages 88 yards a game at home as opposed to 33 on the road. London is a guy who we know has that upside. In fact, before last week's dud, the week before when he was at home, he had his best, season best, 171 yards. Now that was against Tampa, so I don't expect that level of production. but I think a 100-yard game could be in the cards. We know he's got that upside, and what do we say all season long? You want that big game upside. That's why we do this video each week. London has it. Atlanta, let's face it, it's a must-win for them. Their backs are against the wall back at home. They're going to pull out the stops. Maybe Arthur Smith just goes crazy and uses his best players and actually has them throw it to Drake London. So I'll take the chance here. He's got the upside. Drake London, start him. We know it's a must-win for you because it's playoff time in fantasy leagues. That's why we're here to help you with our boom picks. Also starts it at every position, everything you need to keep winning. Check it out in this week's playlist.